This is Dolynny TV, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome back to another edition of Edmonton Oilers discussion here on the channel. And well, you know what? Now finally I've had my chance to watch that Dave Tippett post-morning skate, I guess not morning skate, post-skate interview with the media today. And of course you've probably seen all the headlines popping up throughout the day so far pertaining to Evan Bouchard. But perhaps even more important than getting Evan Bouchard in the lineup is the fact that Dave Tippett noted there are a couple of injuries on specifically the blue line that the Edmonton Oilers are going to have to monitor going into tomorrow night's matchup against the Winnipeg Jets. Now, this is of concern. Why? Well, because the defensive core has been doing just enough to really play some good solid games the past two against Toronto. Yeah, you can say what you want about Adam Larsson's about 5 minutes in the second period there last night, but end of the day is if we get this kind of defensive effort every night and all of a sudden the offense gets back to scoring 3 or 4 goals a game, no problem. No problem. We're back and we are winning hockey games like no tomorrow. Something fancy that I saw on sportsnet.ca that maybe everybody's not paying attention to is the Oilers currently 22nd in the league in goals per game with 2.5. So you know that Connor McDavid, you know Leon Draisaitl, even if we're going to rely on them only to provide the offense, you know that that's not numbers that the Oilers typically carry under just Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Still, it would be about 275, 280, and in that you probably win an extra game against the Toronto Maple Leafs last night. So you see how this goes. Even at bare minimum, the Oilers are still capable of winning more games than they have to start the year. But now we get into kind of what happens when you've played a couple high-intensity games, is the injuries. And well, now you've got Evan Bouchard, who's the only defenseman on the Oilers roster or taxi squad that is yet to play a game this season. And you've got him going in there potentially either tomorrow or the next game to get his first minutes of the season under his belt. And the thing is here from Bouchard, that would be his first NHL minutes since the 2018-19 season, or yeah, hold on, when would that be? Yeah, that'd be a long time ago since we last saw Evan Bouchard, wouldn't it? So yeah, it would be nifty to see what ends up happening here if Evan Bouchard does indeed draw into the lineup. But before you can talk about Evan Bouchard drawing into the lineup is the fact that you have to talk about Adam Larsson drawing out of the lineup. This has been the hot topic thing for the past now about 12-15 hours since we lost that game against the Toronto Maple Leafs last night. And for Adam Larsson, well, here's what's not in his favor. I'll tell you what's not in his favor. Simply, Dave Tippett sat Ethan Bear the other day. Well, that means nobody is untouchable. Everybody sat there all season. Oh, Bear, why is he so untouchable? Why can't we scratch him? He needs to be scratched. Well, guess what? Dave Tippett sat there and sent a message early on in the season. I don't care what you did last year. I don't care what you're doing now. If it isn't good, you're going to sit. And of course, this would be pretty typical Oilers to sit here and not quote-unquote scratch Adam Larsson, but say that he has an injury and sit him out of the lineup for a game without putting him on the IR or something. So that'll be interesting to keep a kind of note on how that progresses. It would be very typical Oilers to do it that way, and that's fine, right? Is I think even if you were to say, oh, Adam Larsson's a little banged up, I think that would be a pretty clear indication for a lot of us that like to read between the lines that he is scratched. So, right, and now, okay, sorry, we've gone Bouchard, Larsson. Problem is, before we can get back to Bouchard, we got to go to Caleb Jones, who has sat out, the past 3 games now. And, well, end of the day, he pretty much wrote himself out of the lineup the way he played early on in this season. And that's kind of a hard part is, you know what, for guys that are trying to get their first or second chance of the season, and then you have a guy that honestly wrote himself out of the lineup, who are you more in favor of getting into the lineup? Are you in favor of seeing something you haven't seen, which is typically what happens early in the season, or are you in favor of going back to something you didn't like to the extent that you took it out of the lineup, i.e. Caleb Jones' play? So you see where this gets really complicated is it goes Bouchard, Larson, Jones, Bouchard, and somewhere along that way you could also say what about Legason in that mixture as well. And oh, don't forget you got to have Chris Russell or Slater Cuckoo somewhere along that way. And what about Tyson Barrie? He hasn't given us exactly what we're expecting out of him. Or what about this or what about that? Well, sorry, here's the weird part. We have played 2 strong defensive games against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and nobody's calling for Darnell Nurse to be traded or scratched. That's probably a clear indication of things might be a little bit shifting after 2 games against Toronto in which the Oilers played strong defense and suddenly Darnell Nurse's name is nowhere to be found in the anger comments. Pretty weird. And I mean, that's coming from me as well, and you know where I stand. So it's an interesting kind of conundrum for the Oilers, you could say, is the Oilers always seem to have guys totally at fault, half at fault, not at all at fault. And now you've got Darnell Nurse, who is usually in the latter half of those categories, now in the first category where he's not at fault at all. And now you've got Adam Larson really falling out of favor, which a lot of us have for a long time asked what's going on with Larson and why are we still playing him and why didn't we trade him last year with this or that or the other thing. But it's tough, right? Adam Larson is your veteran shutdown right-hand shot defenseman, and unfortunately with those kind of players, right, for an Adam Larson, is he can shut down the play for 20 minutes a night, and what he does in the other 15 seconds marks his entire night. And that's where it's going to be interesting, like I said, to see how the Oilers handle the situation should they scratch him. Is it always just a little nicked up, or is it an actual full-on scratch like it was with Ethan Bear and Caleb Jones? But the other part too is then you have waiting in the wings your hot shot right-hand shot defenseman prospect, Evan Bouchard, who by all accounts rocked it in Soderger, of course, then also has rocked it in Bakersfield last year. He's progressed along, and everybody else in his draft class appears to be playing now, so why isn't he playing is the question. Well, now comes the time for us to figure that out, and you can talk about it, right? Dave Tippett didn't commit, oh yeah, Bouchard will be in tomorrow. It is a kind of wait and see at best thing for Bouchard tomorrow, but you'd have to imagine, I think, even if Adam Larson is in the lineup tomorrow, he is on very thin ice, and again, could play 22 and a half excellent minutes tomorrow night, and 5 seconds could be the reason he sits the next game against the Winnipeg Jets. So right there, then all of a sudden, yeah, you know what, maybe not tomorrow, but definitely the next day after is when Evan Bouchard could very well draw in to the Edmonton Oilers lineup. So it's now not so much a matter of if Evan Bouchard draws in is what I'm trying to say. It's a matter of when. And when you kind of cross off, okay, Bouchard, Larson, Jones, Legason, Bouchard, however you want to go through all that, once you kind of look at the lineup as it is and we find out tomorrow who's out, who's in, it's maybe not a question of does Bouchard play tomorrow, but does he play the game after. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tyson. This is Dolynny TV. We await to see what these blue line injuries look like. Obviously nothing serious, or they would have already been on the LTIR to maximize cap space and all that. But as it currently stands, we've got ourselves an intriguing storyline going in tomorrow after a huge effort out of the defense to play some fantastic games against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm Tyson. This is Dolynny TV. I am up on out of here.